Summer has started. The first GAA controversy proper is upon us. Offaly are looking for an interim manager after Stephen Wallace was sacked unceremoniously last night, dumped out despite the fact that, according to him, he had 100% backing from the players. Now, his version of 100% backing and what the rest of us understand by 100% backing is probably a little bit different. But this is the big breaking news overnight, that the Offaly football manager, Stephen Wallace, has been relieved of his duties by the Offaly County Board. We hope to speak to him a little bit later on the show this morning. So this is going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Kerry man. You've been defending him solidly for the last 24 hours.
No, come on. Like, I mean, the fact that where I'm from has absolutely nothing to do with this, and I haven't been defending him wholeheartedly because we've all seen the incident in that club game in Kerry. I think if Offaly turn around after that club game and say to Stephen Wallace, listen, you've been sacked. That is an indefensible piece of violence on the sideline there. We can't have that going on in Offaly. You cannot continue as our manager. I think fair enough. At this juncture, I think it's very odd. I think it's very, like, if that is the reason why they've sacked him, I don't know why they haven't done it when that video breaks in the first place. They've clearly, if you're going to sack him in mid-season, it's got to be due to some sort of freak set of results, and that clearly hasn't happened. I mean, their league results weren't that bad, and they, like, losing to Wicklow by 5 points at the weekend isn't exactly new grim territory for Offaly, and to get rid of a manager in the middle of his first year before having a chance to redeem his methods, maybe because he wouldn't have been on the sideline in the qualifiers, I think is a tad harsh. And I'm not a fan of whataboutery and all that sort of stuff, and I know Stephen Wallace has brought it up himself about the Offaly County Board. There's a lot more going on in Offaly than Stephen Wallace. Stephen Wallace is not the only bad apple in Offaly, and he's going to be tarred badly now as a result of this. I do feel the kind of discourse around it. I think some of the punditry around this story has been very harsh on Wallace, despite the fact that obviously the condemnation for the initial ban was probably correct.
It does mean that Offaly are going to win the All-Ireland, because obviously they got rid of Michael Babs-Keating in the middle of the season. They went on to win the All-Ireland under Michael Bond. I mean, you try a trick once, you repeat the thing, and it happens again. It's fate. Offaly are going to win the All-Ireland.
Yeah, well, no, obviously. I mean, that's just such an outlandish kind of thought at the moment that Offaly will ever come close to that, because there's clearly hugely deep-rooted problems in the county. Like, it is kind of a difficult one to see what's actually going on here, because of the level of mixed messages that we've been getting from inside the camp. From outside the camp, it's been mainly negative, but from inside the camp, we seem to have this letter that was leaked last night that cited support for Stephen Wallace. We're not sure how many of the players actually signed this letter. It was signed off by the Offaly senior football squad. There wasn't individual signatures on it. We don't know who was involved in this specifically, but we do know there was like a last-ditch effort made by some players to save Stephen Wallace's bacon, which clearly failed. We don't know how big the coterie of players was that wanted Stephen Wallace out, because there was clearly some players who did want him out. I mean, it wasn't a fully happy camp. How could it be after you've been dumped out of the Leinster Championship by Wicklow?
Well, yeah, I mean, the truth is you never find out the truth, really, about what happens. There's always a core rump of people who are pissed off they're not in the team. There are people who really like the manager because they've been given their head under him, and inter-county management of these smaller teams, so-called weaker counties, is difficult. Like Wallace points out, and whatever you think about him and his management style and what's happened, clearly the Offaly County Board is a complete shambles, and has been a shambles for the last decade or so, and potentially even longer, going back further. So it's hard not to think there's a pair of them in it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think it's very hard to say that Stephen Wallace didn't have the best interests of Offaly at heart over the last few months. I think the judgment of Stephen Wallace as an inter-county manager is going to come as a result of this sacking, when in actual fact his sacking may have nothing to do with the idea that, you know, he was a poor inter-county manager. Like, we may find out, we may hear the full story from the players, we may hear a very biased account from the players eventually, but it's going to have to be somebody in the playing squad that is going to have to tell us the truth, because it seemed that there was a bit of a division there. It seemed that the selectors have come on board to defend Wallace, and rightly so, because let's not forget how the discourse has been going over the past week. It has been Stephen Wallace is a bad manager and he needs to leave Offaly now. And I'm talking about somebody like Brian Gavin, who has been pundit-in-chief on this story across multiple platforms and seems to become the voice of indignation about Stephen Wallace and the protection. He's kind of like God standing at St. Peter standing at the gates of heaven. That's Brian Gavin. Thou shalt not pass into Offaly football without my permission.
But hang on, isn't St. Peter supposed to be like...
I don't know. I'm not good on religious gates. I've just compared somebody to St. Peter that I'm not particularly happy with. So I probably should have picked a more sinister metaphor there or a simile. But you know what I'm trying to say here. I mean, like it is odd.
Not really. I mean, maybe Brian Gavin, who lives and works there and is absolutely plugged into Offaly GAA, had heard what was going on and thought, somebody needs to take a stand here and say this is not the right course of action for Offaly football.
Or had he heard from one or two players who were unhappy, and they happen to be the most vocal players? The letter last night suggests that's the case.
All right, what's coming up on the show today? We're going to talk rugby a little bit later on. Going to obviously deal with this situation. We're going to find out a little bit about the Irish Sevens rugby team, who are heading off to the World Cup a little bit later on this summer. They're in Moscow this week. This week they fly this morning, actually, I think, to Moscow, for the European Championships. A massive summer for the Rugby Sevens. They've got the Grand Prix coming up as well to try and qualify for the World Series, which obviously culminates in Hong Kong next year, and of course the World Cup in July. Yeah. All right, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
There you go. We'll bring you the newspapers here. And we're going to start with the Irish Independent. Offaly sack manager Wallace, that's the big story this morning. County Board act after pressure from clubs following tumultuous weekend. Offaly County Board has removed Stephen Wallace as their senior football manager with immediate effect. It follows a County Board meeting last night following days of disgruntlement. Not really that many days. Today, I suppose today's Thursday.
It is days of disgruntlement.
Ironically, Offaly players met last night in advance of the training session at the county training session in Kilcormac, but a mood for immediate change was not palpable among those who attended. So the players were like, let's keep going, let's finish the season out and let's try and recover the situation. County Board were like, no, new manager please. New balls please.
It does, like, what happens in the next month? What do Offaly stands to gain in the next month under a new manager? Like, I mean, everybody talks about putting a system in place, kind of ripping up the playbook whenever they come into a new management setup, and they've now got until the 9th of June to try and get this stuff correct. I would say that Offaly season could be over on the 9th of June. And
yeah, I mean, that's nailed on at this stage. Almost like whoever they get, you're kind of going to make the opposition massive favourites. So if they drew New York at this point, you'd be like, there's a good chance for New York.
But the thing is, Offaly have now blown this into a bigger story than it needs to be by sacking him mid-season. Of course it was already a big story, but still.
Leinster setting world standards, according to Keith Earls. Beware the Munster men buttering up the Leinster team and players because, well, let's face it, Munster, I think, should be favourites for this game, given everything that's happened this week. A bunch of award ceremonies for the players, fat new contracts for other players. Ty Furlong now the third highest paid player in Irish rugby. Lucrative 3-year contract for Furlong is the lead story from Gavin Comiskey in the Sports Thursday section of the Irish Times. John O'Sullivan, Toner towers above his Leinster teammates in the numbers game. They've run the stats there on Toner against the rest of the Leinster players in terms of consistency, minutes played, a bunch of other things as well. Real value for money in Devon Toner. And then David Moyes, obviously relieved of his duties or not having his contract renewed at West Ham. Big Sam gone as well yesterday. So a bloodbath from a managerial perspective. Oh, and I know you really want to talk about this. Mayo calling out for help. Ed Collins' damning assessment of how poor planning and preparation is holding players back. This is the lead story really in the Irish Examiner this morning. Most important part. The author is a noted skills acquisition coach who was part of the Mayo backroom team as head of fitness under James Horan from 2010 to 2014. So he knows intimately this Mayo setup and exactly what the players need in order to continue to progress. And he's basically saying there is no plan. There is no semblance of an idea about what Mayo are trying to be. There is no identity for them. It backs up what Jim McGuinness said in his roundabout way from Glasgow by way of a chance meeting with whoever it was. Who did he meet yesterday? I can't remember.
I don't know, it was probably it's some sort of genius anyway, some sort of like physicist from Harvard or something that he bumped into at an airport. But we'll get into that a little bit later on, I think, because there's some absolutely there's dynamite in that article for sure. I mean, when it comes to Aidan O'Shea, when it comes to Stephen Rochford, he does kind of put his hands up and kind of criticise his own setup when he was involved with James Horn to a certain extent, but it's mostly guns out for Stephen Rochford in that article, which we'll get to a little bit later on. On the back of the Herald, United chasing Willian, it says. Manchester United have held informal talks with Chelsea winger Willian's representatives ahead of the summer transfer window. So Eden Hazard was talking about Chelsea cashing in on certain players and potentially signing bigger players. Losing Willian, is that such a good thing for Eden Hazard in his view of Chelsea? It's probably a little bit indifferent. He would want Chelsea to go after somebody of a higher profile this summer. Sad Adam then reads the back of the Mirror this morning. Liverpool star Lallana is left devastated by Russia snub as Southgate puts faith in kids. You've also got that Wallace story there. Wallace a goner as Offaly acts. You've also got Big Sam's disgust at Blues chief. Big Sam, of course, lost his job yesterday, along with David Moyes, and Hammers make move for Benitez. So speaking of Moyes, it looks like he could be replaced by Rafael Benitez if Darren Lewis's story is to be believed here. Whether or not Benitez will actually go to West Ham is an entirely different manner.
Yeah, he will. Big, loads of money, big club, but like funny transfer system there as well, you know. Yeah,
and he's well used to working under difficult owners and all that sort of stuff. And then finally on the back of the Star, in terms of the Irish papers anyway, Fred the Red, Mourinho moves for a Brazilian duo. So Manchester United are closing in on Willian, as we've already mentioned, and now Fred from Shakhtar. You've also got the man of the moment, that's Atlético Madrid beating Marseille 3-0. Antoine Griezmann scoring 2 goals last night in their 3-0 win against Marseille. And then finally this morning, the back page of The Guardian goes like so. Teenage kicks. Southgate puts his faith in youth. There's Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Did we expect him to be in the squad, or was he supposed to be on standby?
There was some thought that if Kieran Trippier was going to be in the squad that he'd be left out, but I think Gareth Southgate's going to play a back three. So I guess you could play Trippier in the right of a back three. Alexander-Arnold's versatile in that regard as well. I think it's great for him. I think it's great to see a bit of youthful exuberance in the squad. And as we discussed with John Brune yesterday, there's a lot of optics when it comes to an England squad.
The FA obviously released that video where the kids announced the squad with the little videos made of the announcement of each player. Presumably they had 1,000 players' names made, and then they just spliced the video together at the last minute when they knew exactly who was in the squad. Or else Gareth Southgate has known for months and months what the squad was. But we played a clip of it last night on the news round, and the FA put out a copyright claim on it, so we couldn't actually continue to show last night's news round on YouTube, which I thought was interesting because, I mean, obviously, if you're making content like that, you want the world to see it. You don't really feel like you have to have a possessive ownership over it. It struck me as like we're happy with this, but we don't have full faith in everybody's ability to understand what we're trying to do. And so it smacked of an organisation lacking self-confidence when you're copywriting a video that you want to share.
That's a bit annoying, because I stood up for that video in the office yesterday. Everybody was like, this is a bit cringy. And I was the only person who was like, you know what? This is a good video. This is a good idea by the FA. I think it's great to see the kids who are going to be the ones most excited by this summer's World Cup, getting their voice out there.
All right, let's move on to the big story of the day. Stephen Wallace is on the line now, the former Offaly football manager. Stephen, good morning to you.
Good morning, lads.
How exactly was the news communicated to you that you were being relieved of your duties?
Oh, well, very simply. I got a phone call last night about 9:30 saying that I'd been relieved of my position as a senior football manager, and it's as short and sweet as that.
Right, and from the county board chairman?
Indeed, yeah. And
so what was your relationship like with the county board and the county board chairman over the last while?
Look, the bottom line is, as a manager, your major concern is your players. There was unbelievable untruth put out in the media this week that I'd lost the dressing room, players fall out, players walking out. Couldn't be further from the truth. The relationship with the county board would, I suppose from day one, it would have been strained because, they're a difficult board to work with. There's ongoing issues all the time in terms of, getting the best possible platforms and processes for the players. It's a constant battle from that point of view. But as a manager, I suppose, look, I'd always consider myself a players manager, and they were my number one concern. And they issued a statement in reply to all this media nonsense. And they handed it to the county board chairman before training last night at around 7:30. And, I suppose it's out there in the media now. It's well documented, where they give 110% support for me as manager, my management team and my backroom team, and we're looking forward to, knuckling down and having a cut off the qualifiers. They were bitterly disappointed with their performance last Sunday, and understandably so, because look, we malfunctioned. And next thing I know, I'm gone. So you answer me that.
You must have had a sense that this was coming after the game at the weekend, did you?
Well, I suppose, look, if you have a strong county board who appointed me, on a 3-year plan to rebuild a whole new team, because they knew the previous Offaly panel, I suppose, you'd lots of well-documented retirements with the likes of Niall McNamee, Brian Darby and the like, you players abroad. So we were building a whole new team. The plan was, like I say, a 3-year plan, blood a lot of young fellas. We gave an amazing amount of young kids National League time, and many of them made their Leinster Championship debut this year. We'd only 5 of last year's panel. I was doing the job according to the remit that I'd been given. But for some reason, the people of Offaly may be expected to win an All-Ireland within the first year of rebuilding a new team.
They didn't, though. They didn't. So they didn't. There's no point. We may as well have a fairly straightforward conversation here. The people of Offaly didn't expect to win an All-Ireland in their first season. So, if you're saying that stuff, obviously something is rankling with you along the way. What is the major bones of your own sense here of injustice?
Well, the major sense of injustice here is, why was I relieved of my duties? Tommy Byrne has already come out twice since then. In the Irish Examiner this morning, he said it's because we lost the Leinster Championship game to Wicklow. And with RT Sport last night, he said it had to do with my suspension and my inability to do my job as a result of that. Mixed messages already. My message is quite clear. My job never moved. My position never wavered. We kept our head down. We were getting on with things. We had a relatively successful year. We got the semi-final of the O'Byrne Cup. Kept the team up in Division 3, which was the plan. And like I say, outside of all that, the players were fully committed to working under our regime. They were very happy with the training platform and process that we were put in place. But the county board weren't happy.
So there seems to be a bit of confusion about why this has actually happened. Once the suspension was given to you, once that hearing was happening around your own situation, was there any communication from the county board that this would impact negatively on your immediate future as Offaly manager?
No, they didn't. This is the whole thing. There was no issue with the suspension. The only issue, the suspension became an issue when we lost the football game. Let's be clear with this. I was in constant contact with the county board. They were fully aware of my situation before the Wicklow game, and it wasn't a problem. But it's a major issue because we have lost the Wicklow game. So it's what a difference a game makes, to use a cliche.
Yeah, I'm sure the suspension didn't help.
But of course it didn't help, but it is what it is. I'm not the first GAA official or player that's going to, have a misdemeanour, get suspended. It is what it is. It's not going to help. But
when you say misdemeanour, Stephen, what exactly were you suspended for?
And there was an allegation. It's a well documented club issue below in Kerry, and something happened.
What happened?
I did something that I shouldn't have done in the heat of a club championship game. My own club were involved, my own friends, my own family. And look, we've all been there. We've all done stupid things. And
sorry, if anybody's unfamiliar with it, what did you do?
There was a bit of a melee, There was a bit of a melee, and I was involved in it. Wasn't noted by the referee or anything like that. And there was guys, put off and everything like that. And there was an investigation afterwards. And I was alleged to have done something in a melee, and I subsequently got suspended. And look, you put your hand up and you take it. Like I say,
sorry,
I'm not the first guy that got suspended in the
GAA.
Yeah,
just to clarify, when you say you were alleged to, did you actually do it, or from your language, it's hard to tell. It seems like you're saying you didn't do it.
Listen. The long and the short of this is I got an 8-week suspension
for punching somebody.
That's the long and the short of it.
For punching somebody.
You're saying that.
Well, I'm asking you.
But you're saying that.
Well, was it for punching somebody?
It was. I got an 8-week suspension.
Is that you in the video that the Irish Independent have published?
Actually, I think I'm not sure what the exact legal infraction on the notice of disciplinary action is, because the club secretary dealt with that. But I don't think in the GAA there's an infraction for punching somebody. But
striking.
if you say there is, let's go with it.
It'd be striking. Well, you can tell me what happened. It's funny because you're saying that it was a misdemeanour, but it doesn't look like a misdemeanour in the video that the Irish Independent published.
So what does it look like?
It looks like punching.
Yeah, but is that not a misdemeanour?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think...
All right, okay, look, let's agree to disagree with that. I'm saying I did something wrong. I got my punishment. I took my punishment. I shouldn't have done it. I got an 8-week suspension. I'm not the first person in the GAA to get suspended. I
guess most inter-county teams don't have managers getting suspended in the middle of the season for 8 weeks for what you term a misdemeanour and for what looks like a punch.
Yeah, well, look, there's been a lot of high-profile managers as recently as last year got suspended. But I'm not here to talk about other inter-county managers and their suspensions. And I think you know who I'm referring to.
I'm sorry, I don't really, but...
okay, well, that's... I'm not referring to David. You've made a statement about other managers not getting suspended.
For punching,
I'm telling you that there are
for
other
punching
people that suspended as recently as last year.
Yeah, for wandering on the pitch. There's a difference there, Stephen, I guess, and is that the point that you feel like that the people of Offaly turned against your management? Because you said earlier on that the people of Offaly expected an All-Ireland victory, and obviously they didn't.
And I gave you an answer that perhaps there was an expectation within the people of Offaly that we should have achieved something this year. I didn't say the people of Offaly turned on me. You're now putting words into my mouth.
Well, you said that they expected to win All-Ireland and that they lost that after you lost the game.
No, what I said maybe the people of Offaly had an expectation that we were supposed to win an All-Ireland this year. So again, you're putting words into my mouth and you're misquoting me.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they didn't expect that they were going to win the All-Ireland this year.
And I'm sure they didn't. But you asked me a question as to why did I lose my job, and I'm saying I don't know.
And do you feel as if perhaps the suspension was a turning point in your relationship with the Offaly football public?
It could well have been, and it may well have been. But my working relationship is with the players, and my working relationship is with the Offaly County Board. And up until yesterday, the day before yesterday, it hadn't been an issue. Or at least, let me rephrase that, at least it wasn't made aware to me that it was an issue.
Stephen, was there an issue with the county board at all over the last couple of weeks once it became apparent that Cian Johnson wasn't going to be allowed to play senior football? This is just kind of one of a number of things that we've noticed come up around Offaly over the last couple of weeks. Did you feel particularly aggrieved by that one of your best players, one of your best performers from the league, wasn't going to be allowed to play in the championship this summer?
Yeah, that rule again, that decision that the Offaly County Board made, well documented as well now at this stage, lads, in the media, they're the only county in Ireland to have made that rule. We were without Offaly's best up-and-coming talent, a guy who had played with us through all the National League, is the current top scorer in the Offaly Senior Championship to the best of my knowledge. If he's not the top scorer, he's in the top two. And they told him a week before the game that he wasn't going to be allowed to play, that he had to play with the under-20s. Now, that is what it is. I suppose the unfortunate irony of this is the best player on the pitch last Sunday was Mark Jackson, who's an absolutely superb talent from Wicklow, who's 19 years of age. But the Wicklow County Board didn't make him play with the Wicklow under-20s. And he probably was the main catalyst in us losing the game last week, which is that's a bitter pill to swallow from us. When we had an under-20 sitting up in the stand that, if we had him, he was probably worth 2 or 3 points to us,
Yeah, because it kind of paints a picture, even separate to the suspension, that things weren't I suppose you weren't seeing eye to eye fully with the county board. Like, did you always feel that was the way, or was this the first week where you thought to yourself, things aren't right with my position and my relationship with the county board?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had ongoing sagas and battles, and every week, there was issues. I suppose every day there was issues. Players constantly, I suppose feeling that they're not getting what they deserve from a county board perspective. And me as manager, I suppose, look, I'm in the middle of that, and I'll stand up for my players every day of the week. And look, maybe that was a problem, that I was looking for too much for the players. But like I say, the player welfare was all, it was paramount for me, and that the players were happy was the big thing for me. And you know, they're on record as saying that they were fully committed to playing under me.
Some of the players are on record as saying, we don't know who actually signed that letter. It was signed on behalf of everybody, but some of the players had actually liked tweets at the weekend which had been critical of the management team and their treatment of individual players. So it did look like there was some division within the camp. I know you've been saying that the media have blown everything out of proportion, but it was clearly that there were some issues at half-time, and it was clear as well that some of your players were liking tweets that were critical of your management team.
Yeah, look, I don't know which part of that you want me to answer. All I would say is, if people looked at that tweet again, those couple of young lads who liked that, unliked it because I suppose senior members of the panel had words with them and expressed their disappointment of what they'd done, and they subsequently unliked it. You know, I suppose, look, there's a big issue with social media and the GA. I've said this for a long time. You know, they're not being advised as to the repercussions of what might seem like an innocuous social media like or retweet or a share or a comment on a Facebook or something like that, and they're not being educated on it. You know, I mean, you know, you've had the well-documented Gary Walsh tweet, I suppose. I don't think there was any badness in what Gary did. I don't think he just didn't realise the repercussions of what he put out on Twitter that time.
Really?
You know? And it's an education process for players.
He's got to have responsibility for his own brain and his own mouth. Like,
sorry?
Gary Walsh has to have responsibility for his own brain and his own mouth.
Yeah, but look, at what I'm saying is the social media is a highly dangerous tool, and it's just something I personally believe in, and I think the GA need to look at educating inter-county players as the repercussions and the dangers of social media. And yeah, look, everyone is his own, it's his own we say man or his own brain, as you say. But look, at the end of the day, a lot of these guys they're young men in high pressure, in a high pressure environment, and you know, I think it's a dangerous tool that needs to be looked at within the GA.
Stephen, can we just get clarity on the record? You said that the letter signed last night gave you 100% backing. That was stated maybe in the contents of the letter. Was it signed by 100% of the squad?
It was put together by the players that were at training last night. It wasn't by 100% of the squad, and it would be inaccurate to say that because there were certain guys not training last night. There were guys working nights. There was another lad that I'd given the night off. There was one or two lads doing exams. So it was uniformity and 100% solidarity for everybody that was at the training session last night. Yeah, but 100% of the squad, that would be inaccurate because not everybody was there last night.
Sure. Like we see on screen at the moment, you can't see it yourself, Anton Sullivan's tweet saying, disappointed after Sunday but glad to be back at it tonight, which was a training session, and I saw that and I was like, right, things are getting better and Offaly. There's a show of solidarity from the players. But then it emerges that you were phoned before the training session, I understand, Stephen. So could Anton Sullivan's tweet here be construed as the opposite, that he's making a statement of intent post the phone call that you've lost your job?
No. I got a phone call 9:30 last night. That's the training session. The lads started training around 7 o'clock last night. Did a team meeting, post-match analysis, and I believe in the region of around 8:20, the letter was handed to the county board chairman. 8:20, 8:30.
It looks like the decision has already been made at that point. Really, the letter came too late.
Possibly, yeah. You know, I really can't comment on that as to what the time frame of the county board decision was, but I received a phone call around 9:30 last night.
Here's the thing: if the county board felt like your position was untenable after the suspension, that was the point to say, look, thanks very much for all your effort, but under the circumstances, we don't feel it's appropriate for you to continue. Would you agree with that? Would that have been a fair summation?
Yeah. You know, I mean, then, yeah, absolutely. I suppose that's a situation you could put a bit of logic to it, but considering what happened this week and the players' reaction and everything like that, you know, to then get the phone call, you know, is I suppose it's hard to comprehend it. But I would totally agree with your summation there. Yeah.
One last point on the Offaly County Board, like. Part of me wonders why you decided to get involved with them in the first place when you see their track record over the last decade or so.
Yeah. Look, yeah, I suppose, yeah, lots of people told me, you know, what I was getting involved in. The Offaly County Board is well documented for the turmoil and chaos that it is. But I suppose when I met with the Football Review Committee, good guys, you know, Finbar Cullen, Vinnie Caffey and Paul Mullen, who'd been appointed to, I suppose, try to fix the football situation in Offaly, to put platforms and processes in place to, I suppose, maybe take them out of the, maybe a bit out of the dark ages and modernise the whole training regime, and giving me, I suppose, their commitment that I was to build a new young team. It was an exciting project, obviously, and one that I thought, I suppose, hard about. And I said, yeah, this is for me. But look, that's the Football Review Committee. The county board is a whole different gig, And look, as it turns to pass, I came a cropper in the end of it, Do
you feel that this is going to damage your prospects of being an county manager into the future?
I couldn't see why. I mean, any county manager that can leave a job knowing that the players have given you your full backing and your full support. They obviously were happy with what we were doing, and were willing to work with me. And so from a personal point of view, I could ask for no more from the players. The players, are on record as being happy with the processes and the platforms and the training systems that we put in place. We had a couple of very, very good results. We had a relatively good year for what is indeed a new panel. We beat Westmeath down in Mullingar to stay up. That was the first time Offaly beat Westmeath in a game for 12 years. So a lot of those guys got a monkey off their back. We went down to Wexford in a must-win National League game to stave off relegation. We were the first Offaly team to beat Wexford down in Westmeath and down in Wexford in 23 years. We got to the semi-final of an O'Byrne Cup. Well-documented game, I suppose, with the Dublin development team. So we great days out as well. Had a moral defeat to Armagh team that had beat them by 30 points last year. Who won Division 3. They'd be, a Super 8 team, and we gave as good as we got that day. So, we were a much improved outfit, and the project was going in the right direction, and the players were happy with it.
Taking that all on board, Stephen, you must have been shocked then to have been getting that phone call. And yet it doesn't seem like it was that much of a shock to you. So something went wrong somewhere along the way.
Yeah, look, so absolutely. But, from my point of view, to have the players backing, the results speak for themselves. We had a whole new panel. We were 6 months into a complete transitional rebuild of a new Offaly GAA squad. And like I say, I got a phone call last night relieving me of my duties. So, that's from a different perspective. But from what happened on the pitch, development, progression, player support, I'd be quite happy on that front as a manager of what we achieved.
Could you understand why there might be some confusion then this morning from people like myself, actually, that Brian Gavin would say that there was discontent in the camp, who clearly seem to have well-placed sources, who seem to have at least some concrete information, and what you're saying is the exact opposite. Can you understand why some of us might be confused then this morning?
I can, absolutely, and I'm actually confused that you were actually telling me that you're confused, because one individual put out information where a player in question, who is apparently at the epicentre of the storm, came out yesterday morning and categorically denied what Brian Gavin had said. So you're believing certain sources that Brian Gavin has. Now I'm confused.
Well, he's kind of a prominent GAA member within the county. To be completely honest with you, Stephen, I was a bit taken aback when Brian Gavin was the source kind of on this story for a number of different outlets. But at the same time, I think because of his well-placed GAA sources in the county, he can't be making it all up.
That's what you say. Brian Gavin is one individual. He's a former inter-county referee. He has absolutely nothing to do with the senior inter-county football team. He has never been at a training session. I've never spoke to the man socially. He doesn't know what's going on in the inner sanctum of my group of players and my regime. But like I say, I'm confused now if his sources are more credible than my sources as the former senior inter-county manager. But if you say so.
Yeah, well, he is the Clara GAA chairman. I guess the question is, why would he say that sort of stuff then if he's not 100% sure, if you are to believe that he's not 100% sure?
I have absolutely no idea, but all I can say to you is Nigel Dunn, who he used in this so-called source, categorically came out yesterday and called him out, whatever you want to call it, for misleading information of what happened in an incident. And if that doesn't speak volumes, well then anything I say really can't supersede that, because that's the player himself who made that statement yesterday. And
just to clarify, so Nigel Dunn's statement said that he did leave the dressing room to have a sulk. I guess it's easy for people to see that and think that he's headed for the exit, as opposed to necessarily headed for his car. I mean, the whole thing about the car and the bus. His statement, just to read it out there in case anybody's unaware of this, because there's a lot of detail. I didn't leave O'Moore Park at half-time on Sunday and head for my car. Sure, I came in the team bus. I left the dressing room to get some air, have a sulk and feel sorry for myself. Nothing more. I was back on the subs bench as the ref threw up the ball for the start of the second half. So obviously something crossed his mind and he was pretty unhappy. It sounds like it was a very heated dressing room at half-time, full-time and at the end of extra time. That statement now could not be further from the truth. It was not a heated dressing room. Nigel was annoyed probably with his performance, and he was annoyed that he had been taken off. He had a little vent. This happens in dressing rooms every single Sunday in every single club county in the country, lad. You weren't actually in the dressing room though, obviously.
No. He left the dressing room. He walked up the corridor. Member of management, we took a decision to go speak to him, chatted it out. Nigel, and I commend him for this, probably recognised maybe the error of his ways, or maybe he overreacted, but all Nigel Dunn wanted to do was play well and for Offaly to win.
And then
he came back in,
and you put him back on in the second half.
He came back into the dressing room. He talked off, and he was available for actually get in the second half.
Right.
A heated dressing room at the end of the game. You couldn't hear a pin drop at the end of the game. Those kids were gutted. They were disappointed. They'd lost the game. They felt they didn't perform. The furthest thing from heated. They were absolutely disappointed and bitterly disappointed and gutted. So a heated dressing room after the game, lad, total nonsense. And Nigel Dunn came back on in the second half, because Nigel Dunn is a good footballer, and Nigel Dunn was thrown under the bus by an inaccurate comment into the media.
I guess if you take somebody off after 28 minutes and put them back on in the second half, management are going to be asked questions about. It's unusual for that to happen unless somebody's injured. It's like you think back to Peter Canavan in the All-Ireland final, obviously when Tyrone were using him carefully in 05. It doesn't happen that much in inter-county football anymore. But look, no point in getting too bogged down in the semantics of it.
Absolutely. But look, I suppose not to have to justify the management decision of the train of thought that took place with Nigel Dunn, but Nigel Dunn was in a bad place. He coughed up a couple of 21-yard frees. His head was down a little bit. The thought process was, let's get Nigel out, let's sit him down for 15 or 20 minutes, let's clear his head, and let's get him back into the game. And that's the logical thought process that went into that decision from the guys on the sideline. And I will stand over that 100%. But that's I'm just justifying what happened there. You're saying it doesn't happen too often. I'm telling you this was the thought process of what went on there.
Good stuff, Stephen. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Not at all, anytime, my pleasure.
Stephen Wallace there, the ex-Offaly football manager, talking to us about the circumstances which have led to his removal as the manager of the Offaly football team.
It's like a wedding cake. There's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah. The bottom layer is definitely the Offaly County Board.
That doesn't mean that there are other layers, obviously.
No, it doesn't. The tiers almost the same size, though. You feel that?
Yeah, I guess so. It's such a strange situation. It's very hard to know what exactly is going on here. I mean, it does seem that we're none the wiser as to why Stephen Wallace. What is the main reason Stephen Wallace has lost his job as Offaly manager this morning after that interview? It's. Do Offaly County Board know why they got rid of him?
We're obviously going to give the Offaly County Board the right to reply to Stephen Wallace's interview this morning. Now we're moving to rugby next. Former Munster player Scott Deasy is going to join us in studio in a second, ahead of the Ulster Bank League Awards which take place tonight. He's the top point scorer in the league this season with Lansdowne Rugby Club. There's a poll running at the minute on the IRFU website about the try of the season in the Ulster Bank League. Here are the contenders. Yeah, that poll is up, available. We've just tweeted it out there for the Ulster Bank League Try of the Year. Scott, good morning to you. How you doing?
Morning, thanks for having me.
Not a bad season for you personally and for the club generally?
Yeah, it was great. Nice to win a bit of silverware. And I suppose the guys put me in position to kick all the points, so it was great.
Yeah, it's always a team thing, but actually individual awards are all that matters. We know this. You're Cristiano Ronaldo at heart, right?
Yeah,
it's all about the golden boot.
Saying last night as well, I think.
Yeah. A couple of things. You were with Munster and end up at Lansdowne, is that right? Yeah. So that process of getting players from the provinces back to the clubs and so that the level of the club game improves, we clearly see the benefits of that when you look at the game time that certain academy players get and the advantage that they have of actually playing in the league on a fairly regular basis and getting game time, because you know we see the cries for game time for Joey Carberry, but he actually really benefited from playing a little bit in the league as well. Yeah,
100%. I think there's definitely a place for the league in the evolution of these young fellas coming through the academy. There's a strong track record of academy players, but also players who aren't in the academy system using the league as a stepping stone to get into the professional game. Joey Carberry obviously would come through the academy, but then you've the likes of Matt Healy and Connacht who's come through Lansdowne. He's out there now, Craig Ronaldson. So there's definitely a place for the league. It's how they position it going forward and how they utilise it to the maximum is probably the question at the moment.
Yeah, what do you think should be the answer to that?
I suppose with the BNI Cup now disbanded as of last weekend, if they do it properly, the league can be used as that stepping stone. But I'm not sure if that's the direction they're going in. But we'll see how it goes.
Do you feel there's a good appreciation of the folklore of the AIL from some of the younger players in the league?
I think I've definitely kind of come to appreciate it more as I'm coming towards the end. But you know, the senior members in the club and the Alakadoos, as you call them, they make sure that you're aware of the history and the traditions, and it would be a shame to see those go to waste. But I think it's a difficult one. There's no silver bullet, or there's no right or wrong in it.
Because it is almost like an era of legends when you think of like the pre-professional era. Some of the greatest characters we've had in Irish rugby are so unbelievably intertwined with the All-Ireland League.
Yeah, and I think you know, they're there in folklore, like the likes of the Shannon guys, Axel Foley, Alan Quinlan, all these guys who came through the league. But then you have the likes of, you know, Peter O'Mahony played in the league, Conor Murray played in the league, Tyke Furlong played for Clontarf. So, you know, the current superstars also did their stint in the league. So I think it is a very valuable asset for the RFU and for the provincial provinces. But it's how they use it. Yeah,
I didn't realise the BNI Cup was coming to an end.
Yeah.
So is there an automatic replacement, or do you guys know what the?
So I'm not privy to these conversations, but there's rumours of an under-23 league with the Welsh provinces. So people looking for game time or academies, kind of like the Espoirs in France. They play an under-23 league, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. But if not, I would hope that they release more players to the Ulster Bank League for game time, so it brings up the standard across the board.
What happens when those players do get released? Because there's a concern that sometimes the level of fitness that you're going to have from a 20, 21-year-old who is completely full-time professional versus some of your teammates who you're all amateurs, or the majority of you would be amateurs. That there's an imbalance there, particularly in scrummaging and stuff like that.
So they have at the moment there's a rule that you can only have one forward and one back.
Okay.
So you know, you can't stack
for the last 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of thing. So we benefit this year with having Peter Dooley available to us in the playoffs, which he was, you know, he's a full professional monster of a man, and he came in and he just dominated the scrum. So you can't have two of those kind of guys on a team together.
Yeah.
So I think that there probably is, you know, a logic to having those rules in place. But you know, if it means you can have a back row and a prop forward, that should be fine, or two backs even, that should be fine. But I can understand why you wouldn't have two front rows available.
And ideally, you'd have them for more than just the playoffs that actually kind of get them over the course of the season, or they'd sub in and out.
Yeah, so there's a rule. I think you have to play 3 games before March before you're allowed to play in the playoffs. Okay. So Peter did play for us in the early season as well.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense, because it feels like the quality has improved to the point where the provinces are happy enough for their players to go, and obviously there are enough of you guys who have kind of played at a very high level who are still playing, and it's also a way for those players to stay through. That the league seems like it is viable.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there still needs to be some aspects of it from a financial perspective looked after, and it's trending in the right direction. It's not there yet.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Well, no, it's definitely trending in the right direction. I think the playoffs and the fact that you have the big day out in the Aviva at the end of the year, and Ulster Bank have been very supportive. There was a decent crowd, even though it probably gets last in the Aviva, but it was a decent crowd in the final. And then the Bateman Cup was on TV. The Ulster Bank final was on TV. So there is it's moving in the right direction, and it's now making sure that the consistency of the players, or the availability of those senior players are there, because some weekends you get no one, or some weekends it could be two teams who have no professional players available to them, or they're shorn of their academy players because of A games, and the quality dips, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
So that's where the issue is.
How easy was it for you to transition from being effectively a full-timer into somebody who had to juggle playing at a high level and also having a job?
Probably struggled for the first year, to be honest with you. So I came out of Munster at 24, so I was still relatively young, and I joined Lansdowne and started working up in Dublin. Probably struggled for the first 5 or 6 months just with the cadence of training on a Tuesday and Thursday night and not during the day, and trying to fit in your gym and trying to get your head around it. Actually an office job, which was a brand new experience for me. But since then I've probably, settled into it. I actually really enjoy the rugby now as well, whereas my last year in Munster was a difficult year. You're being let go, and selection issues and stuff, so I've actually enjoyed the game now again.
Did that last year in Munster allow you to prepare yourself, kind of even just setting up a job, looking around, see what team you're going to join, and I guess just setting yourself up nicely for kind of the non-professional life? Yeah,
so I knew kind of October, November time that I wasn't being kept on, so I had enough time to decide whether I wanted to pursue professionalism abroad or whether I wanted to go back into the real world, in inverted commas. And I probably made the decision around January that I was done with rugby as a profession. And I wanted to go back into the real world, as I say.
How seriously did you weigh up a foreign team?
Not massively, I suppose. Being brutally honest, that the offers weren't that plentiful. There was a couple in the Championship in France, and a few of the Pro D2 teams in France. Sniffed around, but nothing that would have turned my head. I suppose the ultimate goal for me was to try and push on and win something with Munster, and if possible get international honours. And as we all know, if you go abroad, those international honours aren't available. So I was happy with what I had achieved. I wanted to just move on and get on with the rest of my life.
Is that hard?
It wasn't. I'm fairly pragmatic, and I knew that at 24 and with JJ Hanrahan coming behind me, that opportunities would be limited. So, and I think Munster made the right decision in that, you used to take the emotion out of it, and the situation was that I'd been given 3 years to push on, and I didn't. So, unfortunately, that's the way it goes.
And in retrospect, it feels like you did the right thing. You get to play. It seems like you can probably play rugby for another 8-9 years if you want to at this level.
Well, I see my wife-to-be says about that, but at the moment I'm taking it season by season. I have a young family at home as well, so I think I've got the go-ahead for next year. So.
Okay, right. So it's season by season. Grand, that's fair enough. But it is something that there is another way for people to continue playing rugby and to have a career and to have a normal life. And not everybody has to go and travel off and play for those teams that we kind of never hear about. But you get a line in the paper here and there.
Yeah, I suppose there's only a handful of players in Ireland. The O'Connells and the O'Gars, O'Driscolls, etc., and potentially Sexton going forward who'll be able to have sufficient income off corporate gigs, etc., to sustain their lifestyle. But the rest of us, even guys who have 50, 60 caps for Ireland, will have to join the real world and join the workforce. So I was keen to get that started and not lose too much ground on my peers.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because for a lot of people, I'd say it's almost like a bomb exploding right at the end of their career. It's like, I didn't realise that I would have to dip my toe back into the real world. And as well as that, you were 24 when you've got to look back at the real world. You're still in a kind of a developmental stage of your life. I mean, they're 34, most of the people who have to go back into the real world at that stage, and that can be a fairly daunting prospect for them.
It can. I'm sure, there's friends of mine who've left rugby in the last year or two, or who are leaving now. I've had fairly honest conversations with them where they kind of, they're unsure what they're going to do, or they should have done this, or they should have gone back to college, or they should have used their network, the rugby network, more to set themselves up for later in life. And it's something that Rugby Players Ireland are very keen on. Making sure that the players know that this network is available to them.
It seems like they're making more of an emphasis on the education as well. Like Gary Ringrose is almost finished his college course at the moment, and a number of those young players as well. So it seems that there's the realisation after hitting rugby that we need to set these guys up and advise them to go to college.
Well, no, and it's very important. And I think, in fairness to Munster, when I was there, in my final year of the academy, I was looking to get a senior contract, and they kind of gave me a development contract in the middle because they said they wanted me to finish college first before I went full-time. I think that was probably suitable to me at the time, because my parents were very big on the education. They wanted me to make sure I finished my degree, so that suited the time. But I think other players, they're probably a bit less cognizant of the education. They just want to push on, which is understandable as well at 20, 21. So
obviously, as a Munster man living and working in Dublin, what's going to happen at the weekend?
Obviously the heart says Munster. Leinster they've learnt this lesson before when they win the Highland Cup, that if they lose concentration, they can slip up.
Yeah, it's hard to learn that lesson, really, though.
It is, but I think
it's happened before. I would say it makes it more likely to happen again rather than not.
It's very, we're not in the change room. We don't know what the atmosphere is like. But I would imagine that the culture they've built there over the last 18 months, and with someone like Johnny Sexton driving at that, I'd be very surprised if he allows the standards to slip. But in saying that, I know Pete will have the lads chomping at the bit to.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like it's not. It's not even that Leinster's culture has to slip too much. It's just that, like, no matter what happens, we've had a really successful season. We were by far the best team in Europe. Even if these guys kill us, that actually just means an extra couple of weeks holidays. Before we go off to Australia and beat the Australians. Like,
somehow I don't think they're thinking that.
Will I hit this ruck? Yeah, I'll hit this ruck.
Well, it's very fine margins. It's even if they're off by 1%.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Well, it's great for Irish rugby if Munster win then, if you take that into account, because then Leinster come into next season, they're like, we can't let our standards slip by even 1%.
Yeah. Well, look, I hope Munster win.
Right, on that note, surrounded by two Munster men this evening. Scott, good man, thanks very much for joining us. Congratulations. A reminder that the Ulster Bank League Awards are on tonight in the Aviva Stadium. Joe Schmidt himself will be presenting the awards to the winners. To play us out on the rugby bit for now, here's Rory O'Connor on the influence of James Ryan.
There is a perception out there that he has had a couple of big injuries, and I remember Malcolm O'Kelly during the Six Nations was just a little bit wary of kind of anointing him just yet, because part of being a top professional is being durable, and Devon Toner is the ultimate, in never getting injured. Like his record over the last couple of years, he pitches up every week in, week out. Ryan has come through since those remarks, during the Six Nations. He's pretty much had a really good unbroken run, and his performances are getting better and better. And I think he does have things to add to his game, because if you watched him at under-20s level, he has an offloading game that we haven't really seen in the top professional level yet. He has a passing game that, like Tyke Furlong, they can work him into that system, and maybe Australia is the time to do that. Leinster haven't really been using that forward distributor as much as they tightened up as the competition's gone on. I think there's scope for him to do that. I interviewed him along with a couple of colleagues a couple of months ago, and I asked who are your kind of the players you looked up to growing up, and he made me feel old when he said Brodie Retallick and Eben Etzebeth. But he's now in that, he's working himself very much into that company. He is already, and I accept what Keith says, teams are going to work him out, and teams are going to have a good idea of him by next season. So there is definitely he is going to have a much more difficult next season. But I mean, some of the stuff that he's producing is so exceptional. And I just think of him and Ian Henderson in Ireland jerseys alongside each other, and the dynamism that you have in that pairing. Would say a Toner to come in, or there's a couple of others there as well. But second row after Paul O'Connell looked a little bit light, but it's funny how it happens. A bit like O'Driscoll giving way to ring rows. We now have O'Connell retires, and here comes O'Connell 2.0 with hands. He's just such an exciting prospect.
Yeah, man of the match of the weekend, James Ryan. Were you on the man of the match of the weekend? We managed to back James Ryan.
Really? The man who is never going to lose a game of rugby ever again. Like, it's just going to be decades down the line, and we'll be like, James Ryan still not lost a match.
Yeah, it might be worth having a look at the odds for that at the weekend as well, because if they win, it's going to be him or Levy in most of these games for the next while, because it's voguish, it's trendy, everybody's looking out for it.
He's like one of about 5 to 10 players that have put on the green jersey or played for Leinster that within their first season you're like, this guy's going to become an all-time great.
Yeah. Tommy Byrne, the Offaly County Board Chairman, has been listening to our Stephen Wallace conversation, and we're going to talk to him in just a couple of minutes' time. In the meantime, though, here, just to recap a little bit on what we've been talking about, Brian Gavin has been one of the main pundits really talking about this. He obviously is a former inter-county referee, famously refereed All-Ireland hurling finals, generally considered to be an excellent referee, and has now, since his retirement, become a pundit on hurling and football for Midlands Radio. And he was on with the lads on Off the Ball on the radio during the week, having a chat about the entire Stephen Wallace situation. Have a look.
There was rumours. There's not rumours, it's a fact that 6 or 7 of the players said they will not go back if Stephen Wallace continues continues on as manager of the Offaly, and we just can't. We've only 26 or 7 training as it is, so we couldn't lose another 6 or 7. That's for certain.
And how do we know that, Brian, or when was that said?
Well, it's broken through to the RTE website today that players have confirmed that they wouldn't be going back under the management, and I think they have let the county chairman know, Tommy Byrne. So,
and are these potential starters?
Oh, I'd say maybe 3 or 4, Joe, definitely potential starters. Obviously, we won't mention names, and that wouldn't be fair to the chaps involved, sure. But definitely. So there was a rumour that there was going to be training tomorrow night. I can't see that happening, and waiting to see who turn up nearly, which is, you'd nearly think that was a Junior B situation, who will turn up and what will happen. So it's unfortunate for Stephen Wallace and his backroom team. In fairness, I interviewed him a few times. I found him grand. I couldn't have any complaints, but as I said, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was the incident in the Kerry Club game. It just left a very, very sour taste. And the players then, I'd say, were disgusted with what they saw, and it hasn't got any better, plus the Johnny Maloney incident. So I just can't see that he's lost the complete dressing room at the moment, and I just can't see a way back. And unfortunately also, Joe, that former players who really put work into Offaly for down through the years, Alan McNamee, Rory Allen, they have said tweets, which is on social media, and they've got likes from some of the current players. So it's a real mess, to be honest with you, Joe. And I just hope that we could get over this and maybe appoint someone for the qualifiers and start looking to Division 3 next year to try and build momentum.
So in fairness, the stuff about the tweets was definitely accurate, but it's clear that Stephen Wallace hadn't actually lost the entire dressing room, because some of the players did sign a statement last night which was handed to the county board ahead of that training session, which obviously did take place. We do have the Offaly County Board Chairman Tommy Byrne on the line. Tommy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Can you confirm any of the stuff there that Brian Gavin was saying? Had players contacted you in advance after the game on at the weekend and in advance of training to say that they wouldn't continue under the current manager?
Listen, I talk to the players' reps on a regular basis whenever we need to talk. I'm not dragging any players into this. This was a decision of the management committee of Offaly County Board. The players just want to play, and that's what we're going to let them do. We made the decision. We do the appointing. Whenever we have to terminate an appointment, we did it. It doesn't involve the players at this stage, and it's our job to run the association in Offaly in between county board meetings. We took that decision last night, and that's all I'm going to really say about that. We will not be involved in players, because players just want to play football or hurling, whichever the case may be.
Well, so why did you take the decision then?
Well, the manager is suspended for what will be a good bit of the remainder of the campaign this year. And it's a very difficult situation that the manager is central to everything that happens. He cannot be involved in training, cannot be involved in match days, and we felt that wasn't in the best interest of the team. Tommy, that the manager wasn't being involved.
Tommy, when was he suspended?
The process finished finally last Saturday evening, unless he takes another step forward.
Last Saturday evening?
To the best of my knowledge, the appeal was to Munster Council last Saturday evening.
So you're saying that the county board acted as soon as they possibly could after the suspension came into place? Is that the logic here?
That's the logic. We acted on that, and it is the primary concern.
Why didn't you sack him last Saturday evening then, before the game?
I actually wasn't aware of it until Sunday.
You weren't aware of what now?
That there was an appeal on Saturday night.
So what difference did the appeal make then?
But sure, the appeal is the part of the disciplinary process.
But if you were unaware
of it, is for something that doesn't concern Offaly. This is for an incident that happened in Kerry.
But obviously it does concern Offaly. Sorry,
it does. But the actual process was because of an incident that happened in another county. It didn't happen in Offaly. And there is a disciplinary process, and until you get to the end of that, that's what the situation is.
Did you see the incident, Tommy, regarding Stephen Wallace, and did you make any sort of judgment on whether or not he should continue as Offaly manager as a result of that?
Sorry, I missed. Did who make any judgments?
Did you and the county board make any judgment as a result of seeing the footage of what occurred between Ardford and John Mitchell's in the Kerry Championship?
Listen, that footage has been around there since the incident.
Yeah.
That was part of the disciplinary process, as far as I know. We made our decisions on what's best going forward for the players at the moment and for the county.
Sorry.
And we felt that the manager not being able to take part in the preparations, not being able to be on the sideline, not being able to in the dressing room on the day.
But he hadn't been available for the last couple of weeks. Like the suspension had kicked in a couple of weeks ago.
Sorry?
The suspension had actually kicked in a couple of weeks ago, right?
But there was a continual situation of first there was a CCC meeting in Kerry. The process then would be that there'd be a hearing, and then there was a right of appeal. It's all part of a process.
It is, but you knew all along that he was going to get suspended,
he was already all along because we weren't involved in this situation.
But he'd been suspended for the last couple of weeks.
He felt that he informed me that he felt that he would be proved innocent or not guilty or whatever. But I'm not really. There's no point in going on about the thing. This is not relevant today. The only thing relevant today is that that term is over now, and it's up to us to put another management team in place.
Sorry, it's relevant because there's no logic to your decision. He was clearly suspended and was facing a suspension weeks ago. He hasn't been involved with the team, and then suddenly they lose the game, and 4 days later you then subsequently decide, okay, it's time to sack him now. Like there's actually no consistency to your thought.
Well, we're quite happy with our decision as we've made it.
Should you not have made it 4 or 5 weeks ago, though?
No.
But you waited until he was in the championship, until they've actually lost the first round of the championship, and now you've lost your manager in the middle of the championship.
You just want to focus on something now. I'm saying our position is that we've made our decision. The decision is final. We are moving on to get a management team in place to get the players back on the field, training to get ready for the next round of the championship.
Did you sit down with Stephen Wallace about a 3-year plan? He said earlier on that he had a 3-year plan for Offaly to try and get Offaly back on the right trajectory once again. Did you sit down with him to analyse that?
We would have hoped that this appointment would have been for 2 to 3 years, yes. And unfortunately, no one envisaged it finishing like this.
So why did you employ Stephen Wallace on the back of a 3-year plan that he had instigated, and why are you now tearing that plan up by essentially sacking him?
Because we feel that it's in the best interest of Offaly at the moment to move forward with a different management setup.
Is that not very short-term thinking?
Well, that's what we decided. We will be putting an interim team management in place now, and then at the end of the championship this year, we will review the situation and we will decide what is best for Offaly then going forward.
It seems that the interim management is just going to be a stopgap between here and the end of the season. I think from what you're saying there, I think you'd probably be on the same kind of train of thought. So it just seems strange to me that you would tear up what Stephen Wallace was planning with Offaly for the following 2 years of his term, just for the sake of a stopgap management team that who knows how far they're going to go this summer.
Well, we don't know how far they're going to go. As long as possible, the longer to go, that's what we would hope, that they will be involved in the championship for a good while. And we will put that in place. And that's where our thoughts are now. Like, we made our decision yesterday. I know the media want to look back on this, that and the other. We will not be looking back, we're looking forward.
Sorry, hang on a second now. We don't want to look back on this, that and the other. We want to look back to the 11th of April was when the 8-week suspension was handed down. This is now the middle of May. You could have fired Stephen Wallace logically, and I don't think anybody would have blamed the Offaly County Board for saying this is not a good look for our manager. We don't want anybody who has this type of suspension involved with the management.
What happened on the 11th of April? Because you're putting out a date there. Who handed down what suspension?
That's when the news broke that he was facing an 8-week suspension.
Yeah, but you're not suspended until you have a hearing. And that only happened in the last 10 days.
You said you came on and said you didn't know that the appeal happened on Saturday, though. I
wasn't informed of the appeal on Sunday. Yeah.
Why didn't you sack him then when the appeal was heard?
This was Sunday when the team had got together to go to the match. So I was informed of that.
So if they'd won the game, would you have sacked him?
It would be. I can't say it. It was members of the management committee who made their decision last night, and it may have been the very same decision. We dealt with what the facts in front of us were last night, and what decision we would have made if the facts were different is pure speculation, because we don't know. We made the decision on what was there in front of us.
It looks like you've sacked him because he lost.
No. Sure, like teams lose all the time. You know, like if managers are sacked every time they lost a match, there'd be no managers. So.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So the winning and losing the game had nothing to do with Stephen Wallace being sacked.
winning and losing on Sunday. No, it's like, sure, you take your chances. Every game like that has a 50-50 chance.
And the players apparently liking that tweet.
I said at the beginning, there's no point in talking to me about the players. We are not bringing the players into this. The players just want to play. I will not be making any other comments.
But just let me know. Okay, the players themselves came into it by actually issuing a statement last night and handing it to the county board. At what point did you guys actually decide that Stephen Wallace was no longer going to be the manager of Offaly? What time last night did that happen?
Probably 5 minutes before I told him. The meeting started at approximately 8:30, and I don't know what time it was.
So you got a letter from the players at 8 o'clock saying they were happy to.
You can keep asking me all day about.
I'm not asking you about individual players. I'm asking you specifically. Will the players
into this?
Did the players not say they wanted to work with Stephen Wallace? Sorry, this is not asking you to throw the players under the bus or blame them for anything. But they said it's reported widely across the media today that there is a statement from the players that was handed to the county board last night. Did that happen?
Listen, you can keep asking me that question all day. I'm telling you, we will not be making any comment on anything got to do with the players, other than that the players want to play football, and we're going to put something in place. So that
you ignored their desire to continue to work under Stephen Wallace. Is the point Stephen Wallace is making?
Listen, there's no point continuing to ask the same question. I'm not going to answer the question any more than I've answered it.
I don't understand why. So Stephen Wallace says that he had the support of the dressing room.
Listen, this is about Offaly now. This is about Offaly going forward.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I don't really understand. You can't confirm or deny that you got a statement from the players last night, even though every newspaper in the country has published it this morning.
I've said at least 4 times already that I will not be commenting on anything concerning the players other than their desire to play football, and that's what we're going to put.
Why not?
Things in place.
Why not?
Because I'm not going to. This is Offaly County Board makes the decisions to appoint people or remove them, not the players. There's no point in talking about the players here.
So you don't care about the players?
Want to play football, and that's what we're going to give them the opportunity to do.
You don't care about the players' view on management? You don't.
You're saying we don't care about the players. We're consulting with the players here, and we're talking to the players. The players want to just leave it as it is, and I'm not actually answering any more questions concerning the players. The players, I know where we are with the players at the moment and what they want to do. And we're going to do that.
Stephen Wallace did say that he had had long-running battles with the county boards, that he believed it was because he kept asking for things on behalf of the players. Can you confirm or deny that?
When they're just out of a job, are going to have complaints about this, that and the other. Since Stephen was appointed, I've never had anything only good relations with him. Whatever comes out of it now, he's bound to be hurting now. I'm not going to gainsay that. We haven't had on-and-on battles with him. Every county managers are always looking for more. You can give them a certain amount. You can do this, that and the other. We have very good training facilities. We had a difficult year this year with weather, as at every other county. But this year we've been in a better position than we've ever been as regards what we have in place with training facilities.
Why isn't Cian Johnson playing for the senior team, Tommy?
Cian Johnson is not playing for the team because Offaly County Board decided last September that all under-20 players would play under-20 only in the championship, and that was reaffirmed unanimously at the last County Board meeting, and you were well aware of that.
Did you listen to the concerns of Stephen Wallace because he had the opposite view?
But sure, this is an Offaly County Board decision. It's not, the County Board, full County Board made both decisions.
Would you not think that the opinion of Stephen Wallace might be valuable considering he was his manager for the entire National League this year?
Our position was not about Cian Johnson only. It was about all players under 20 that we feel they should play under 20 championship for their county, and when they're gone out of under 20, then that they play. And this is the position of all the club delegates in the county.
He says that the Offaly County Board are holding me back. That's a direct quote from Cian Johnson. What's your view on that?
The decision was made on this last September before any of the managers in Offaly were appointed. They all knew at the time of the appointment what the decision was and what the desire for the delegates was that they play for their own age group.
Do you think it's a fair opinion to hold that the Offaly County Board are too involved in the senior team and they don't let the senior team to their own devices?
The Offaly County Board wouldn't be involved in what goes on at training or anything like that, other than what we have to put in place. That decision, as I said, was communicated to the under 20, and senior managers during the appointment process, and both were very well aware of what the county's position was.
It does seem like a fairly cavalier move, though, to sack the manager of the...
what our position is, and our position is the same still.
Yeah. It does seem like a fairly cavalier move to actually sack the manager mid-season when there might be no material effect on an interim manager, especially because he had put down a 3-year plan.
Sure, listen, the circumstances that we were faced with last night, we made our decision. That decision is made. We could talk about it forever. It's not going to change.
Yeah, it just seems that we don't have a clear understanding of why the decision was reached. Sorry, that's just why I'm kind of...
So we have, listen, I've said it on numerous occasions since we started to talk, that the decision was made because we feel that a manager that is suspended from all GAA activities couldn't in the longer term, carry out his responsibilities. That's end of story.
Grant, you guys appointed him. Do any of you take responsibility for the fact that you appointed this guy?
Of course I do.
And so
it's regrettable that in this situation, I never envisaged this situation, and take full responsibility for our decision to appoint him. And we felt it was the best thing to do at the time. Now we feel that we had to make the decision we made last night. We made that decision, but yes, take full responsibility for appointment.
And what does taking responsibility mean? Someone's going to resign?
No.
So you don't really have any. There's no repercussions. It's like, oh, I take responsibility for that. That's a bit of a pity. Let's move on.
Yeah.
All right. Fair play to you. Got brazen this out. Tommy, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Okay.
Tommy Byrne there, the Offaly County Board Chairman, takes responsibility but is not returning and won't be actually moving or holding anybody else to account other than the manager.
Yeah, I wish I had his fortitude. That's for sure. I just wish I did. To be quite frank, I would probably do a lot of things better in my life.
Would you take the Offaly County football job next season?
No. Not a hope.
Not sure.
No chance. But yeah, I don't think I'm the right candidate here. That's the reason why.
Cian Johnson will be able to play next year. Will he?
Yeah, to be
is he old enough?
The reason why I asked that question is kind of more to do with the kind of relationship between the county board and decisions that are made regarding those sort of players, and it just seemed that Stephen Wallace clearly aggrieved by that decision.
No, he won't actually be able to play next year, so don't
disagreed with that.
Yeah. So don't take the job next year. It's the year after that you want the job if he's still playing football.
Yeah.
All right, that was a bit of crack this morning. A bit longer than we had anticipated spending on Offaly football of a Thursday in May.
You see, the thing is, this stuff doesn't even need to happen anymore. Like usually, the early stages of a championship, it's very slow moving, and it's like, oh, let's look into Offaly, see what's going on. Whereas this year, there's so many games, you don't actually need to talk about this stuff. But it's just been such an extraordinary turn of events here, and it is an extraordinary story. I would love to know what has actually happened. Like, we haven't got the full story here, but hopefully we've dug into a little bit of it and got a couple of sides of the story.
Yeah, as you said, it's layered. There may well be wrong on all sides.
Yeah, I'm sure there is wrong on all sides. I'd be very surprised if there wasn't, but nobody's perfect here.
And if they'd sacked Stephen Wallace when the footage emerged, I think everybody would have been happy enough.
And do you know what? Stephen Wallace actually agreed with you on that point earlier on. He's like, do you know what? I wouldn't have said it would have been the worst thing in the world.
Tommy says you can't sack him until the disciplinary process is over, and that's their defence. That's their... Oh, there was an appeal last Saturday. Woo! Which they didn't know about. We've wriggled out of that one. When was the appeal Saturday? Well, we couldn't sack him on Sunday. You couldn't sack him on Sunday, but you didn't know about the appeal on Saturday. And so nothing changed in the interim.
Yeah, it would have been funny if the pictures of Stephen Wallace in the hood in the programme were actually accompanied by Tommy Byrne beside him saying, you're sacked, you can take your hood off and leave O'Connor Park immediately.
All right, the World Cup squad for England was named last night. Here's Roy Smith and Joe Hart's peculiar reaction to not being selected.
And Joe Hart's not been playing, and he wasn't dropped because he advertised his Head and Shoulders or because David Moyes took a dislike to him. He was dropped because he was letting in loads of goals. I think the way he's responded to being dropped is by England is really, really strange. I'm for a player who's kind of carved out a reputation as being someone who's always willing to front up, who's always willing to stand up and be counted, to try and pass the buck on to your club manager, who clearly made a decision that it was in the club's best interest for you not to be playing in goal because you were not playing well. That seems a really strange thing for a senior player to do. You could maybe understand it of a younger player who hadn't been through those situations before. But Joe Hart really should be looking at why he was dropped by David Moyes and thus why he's not in the England squad, rather than thinking it's David Moyes' fault that he's not in the England squad.
Yeah, a point that we were making on the show, Joe Hart has always found somebody else to blame for his shitness.
Yeah, he was particularly bad this year.
I mean, that's a skill. It is a skill to be able to blame somebody else for all of the things that go wrong in your life.
Oh, without question, yeah. Here is the squad. Jack Button, Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope, the 3 goalkeepers England are bringing to the squad. In fairness, the Joe Hart thing has a very small material effect on the England squad because he wasn't going to play because he would have been third choice keeper.
Yeah. It was like, do you want him stinking the joint out and banging on about his Head and Shoulders ads? It's a pretty interesting team. I mean, Gary Cahill made it. Everybody thought he wouldn't make it. I don't know whose place he's actually taken. But there's a lot of pace and there's just enough defensive solidity, and if everybody plays well, they might make it to the quarterfinals to get knocked out on penalties.
It's like a very average album that the more you listen to it, the more you're like, actually this album is good, when in actual fact it isn't. The more I've looked at that squad, I'm like, this is actually a good squad, when clearly
is Trent Alexander-Arnold really good because also playing in his team, Mo Salah is taking a lot of attention away from everybody else? Is that why suddenly some of these players are like, Raheem Sterling has some of the best footballers in the world also on the field creating space for him?
Yeah, that was certainly going through my mind when I started to think this is actually a good squad, because you think of what Alexander-Arnold and Sterling have achieved this season. But it's going to be interesting. Like, it's one of the first England squads that you kind of half root for, which isn't a good thing. Like, all the good England squads, you're like, I hope they fail miserably. Whereas with this one, it's a very average squad, so you start to root for them. So, yeah, not a good sign for England that we are going to be kind of a little bit sympathetic towards their cause. Although Gareth Southgate's a really likeable guy.
Oh, look, I would like England to do really well at the World Cup. I don't have any post-colonial inferiority complex. It's the football that we spend most of the time watching. Like,
I wake up every morning thinking about the 800 years.
Ed Sheeran, are you going?
No.
Have you got tickets?
No.
That's not your scene.
Maybe Rolling Stones tonight. I think
you have tickets.
I might buy some later if ticket prices drop dramatically, if the weather's good, like bucket list sort of stuff to go see the Rolling Stones.
Is it really?
Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, like, why not?
Well, because you could probably stick a VHS tape in and get a much better experience than seeing them live now.
No, I want to kind of see just how old they look. I want to see, is it possible for a human being to play guitar and subsequently look that old? Like, I don't think humans were built to play guitars at that age, but I want to see proof of it. It's a human feat of scientific exuberance, really. And yeah, that's the only reason I'm going to go. Bucket list in terms of science, not bucket list in terms of music.
A lot of people defending the Offaly County Board on our Twitter. Fair enough. If that's how a county board is supposed to be run, fair play to you. Delighted for you. Well done, lads.
We may get to some of those comments in a moment. There's a GAA story today that is going to get buried as a result of what's happening in Offaly, which we need to talk about. It's Dr. Ed Collins' column in the Irish Examiner, and it's extraordinary.
He is hammering, absolutely hammering, the Mayo management team. In the subtlest of hammers, but explain this.
I usually pick out like a couple of lines that I highlight that I would read. I've picked out, I think, 6 passages here, so bear with me. We can chat about them as we go through them. So here's some of the best bits from Ed Collins today, in the Irish Examiner, by the way. It's page 2 and 3 under sports supplements. So he talks about Sunday's performance against Galway was so disappointing for so many reasons, as it suggests they have never been as poorly prepared for a championship opener as they were in Castlebar at the weekend. The sham team sheet announced to the media and in the matchday programme is an embarrassment for such a storied group of players to endure. He talks about Ger Cavanagh. He talks about all the attributes that he has and how he makes a coach look good. His attention to detail and duty to a given task is second to none. But like all players, he not only benefits from the outside perspective of a coach, but thrives at an interaction. A perfect case in point was a 2014 All-Ireland semi-final against Kerry, where Kieran Donaghy dominated their matchup. No one was more aware of the impact it had on the outcome of the game than Ger Cavanagh. In addition, anyone who knew anything about football knew that in the replay in Limerick the next day, Kerry were going to go after that apparent chink in the Mayo armour. Yet, was a single high ball put in against Ger Cavanagh in the intervening time in training? Was he marked by a player of similar attributes to Donaghy? The evidence in the replay would suggest not. So this is the first thing we need to say. Before we get into Sunday, he has kind of, he's targeted the James Horan era at Mayo here, despite the fact that he was, he is a noted skill and acquisition coach who was part of the Mayo backroom team under James Horan from 2010 to 2014. So he's put his hands up here, I think, to kind of say, look, listen, there have been failings before. Then he talks about Aidan O'Shea. Now, the Aidan O'Shea part here is very interesting. He talks about Aidan O'Shea's progression. He talks about the 2008 All-Ireland minor final against Tyrone when he was superb. Where is that young man gone? Colin asks. It's one thing to add to a player's game, but to take something away is sacrilege. It's bad enough that in the 10 years since the minor All-Ireland final, he has not developed a right foot. But to see him on Sunday reluctant to strike off his once dominant left foot, even from inside the D, is too much to endure. That's a pretty damning indictment of Aidan O'Shea, to say that he hasn't progressed in the last 10 years to the point where he can become a top-class forward. I would say people would agree with Dr. Collins' take on that. I disagree with that. I happen to disagree with that. But it's a fairly harsh thing to say about Aidan O'Shea. And once again, O'Shea comes up for individual criticism after a Mayo defeat. He talks about James Horan's legacy, and he says that it's somewhat safe in the fact that he brought an edge to Mayo. Then he talks about Holmes and Kennelly, that partnership followed were to bring the football smarts that had cost them so dearly before. That was their plan. But instead, they did their level best to sever any likelihood of continuity, which inevitably lost them their jobs within a year. Then the understanding when Stephen Rochford came on, now this is where it gets interesting. When he came on board in 2015, the understanding was that the players would finally have a manager with the necessary attention to detail off the field, as well as the badly needed coaching on it, based on his time at Curra Finn, who incidentally have continued to succeed in his absence. Now, Diarmuid O'Connor's appalling elbow strike on Galway's Paul Conroy on Sunday provides a ready-made excuse why Mayo did not win following his red card dismissal. Such self-handicapping antics are commonplace in sport and other domains where people intentionally sabotage situations to provide a backdrop to excuse eventual outcomes. From the outside looking in, this Mayo team are calling out for help.
What do you think?
There's a lot in there.
What do you think?
Are Mayo a team looking outside, screaming for help? I don't think so. Was their performance anywhere near perfect on Sunday? Of course it wasn't. They were poor on Sunday.
I don't think... So Jim McGuinness's piece and this piece together are basically saying the same thing, that there's no overarching structure, that they don't have... So if you look at Leinster when they're at their very best, if you look at the Dubs when they're at their very best, if you look at all of those teams, they have a very specific philosophy and identity. When we're in possession of the ball, we're trying to do this. When we're out of possession of the ball, we're trying to do this, this or this. And everybody knows exactly what that function is. The Mayo game plan, as identified by McGuinness, was there was an individual runner and he'd look around and be like, where is everybody? Now maybe everybody's injured or just not fully fit yet, and maybe having Parsons go off and having Leroy not be fit and having a couple of other players not be fully at the level they're supposed to be at, and Diarmuid O'Connor off means that instead of having that pod of players, it's like, actually my two buddies are gone, and so there's confusion. But that means they're not well drilled enough.
But we've seen a well-drilled Mayo team in the last 2 years. We've seen it under Stephen Rochford, that they are a well-drilled side, that they go into a game, particularly against Dublin, against Kerry last year as well, with a perfect game plan.
Do they, or is it actually...
They are attacking in unison. There are
the individual brilliance of Lee Keegan and a few others. Is it the individual brilliance of Andy Moran? I don't know. That's what the argument is, right?
Yeah.
And it seems pretty compelling.
It's pretty compelling if you judge it on a microcosm of Sunday.
No, I think that if you actually look at Mayo since the end of the Horan era, I'm not sure that they've fully... They should have won All Ireland. Like, that's the problem.
Of course they should have.
And until they do, you can't say that it's actually working.
No, like, I don't know. To say that Aidan O'Shea hasn't progressed to the level he can get to, I'm not sure is that fair in terms of his individual skill set. Has he been utilised correctly, always in the right way throughout his 10-year senior career? Maybe that's the nub of the point here. Like, where is that young man gone? Colin asks.
He's had a pretty good career.
He has. Like, I can see where he's coming from, that there is kind of a sense, and sometimes it's an incorrect sense, that Aidan O'Shea hasn't quite reached the peak of the mountain that he had promised to reach. But is that not just because he hasn't got an All-Ireland winners medal?
I hadn't realised they'd lost every game in McHale Park this year.
That's another thing he points to here.
Go away.
Yeah, it's worrying times for Mayo. There's no question about it. It's more worrying than it was last year, just because of the schedule of games and because the qualifiers are inevitably going to be a bit tougher this year if the open draw goes against them. So, there's no question that there are well-made points here all across the board. But I just fear that we were saying the exact same thing about Mayo last year, and that Stephen Rochford does come up with a plan when it matters. Let's not forget it's May. There is shadow boxing going on right now. Why would you show your hand on the 13th of May?
Well, because you need to win. The team's knackered. You need them to go through.
They need to win, though.
I think they
needed
did.
to beat Galway last year as well. Maybe they did. Maybe if they beat Galway, they would have won the All-Ireland. Who knows? If they'd gone through the front door last year, they might have won the All-Ireland.
I don't think so. I think that actually last year was okay for them. But
it's a very interesting piece. It's a good piece. It's a lot of food for thought there. I can just see this being plastered up on the Mayo dressing room wall at the end of the year, saying, look what people were saying about us earlier in the year.
Big show for you this week. We're at the home patch of the Bull Hayes. Off the Ball in association with Heineken Rugby Club is back on the road on Wednesday, May the 23rd. That's 6 days from now. We're live from Brough, the home club of two Ireland legends, Fiona Steed and John Hayes. Eddie O'Sullivan will also be joining us to preview the final weeks of the rugby season and to look back at an epic year for Irish rugby, which has included a Champions Cup win and a Grand Slam, and at least one team in the PRO14 final. Well, only one team in the PRO14 final. Tickets are free, but you need to register now at offtheball.com/events and use the password BroughRFC, all one word. It's the latest Off the Ball Roadshow in association with Heineken Rugby Club, live from Brough on Wednesday the 23rd of May. And just make sure you do use that password BroughRFC. So, something different for you here now on OTB AM. The Irish Rugby Sevens have a very interesting summer coming up. Just before I tell you that, a reminder that OTB AM is brought to you this morning with Air, the home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. Yeah, so the Irish Rugby Sevens have a very interesting summer coming up. Can the sport become mainstream in Ireland? We've been out to Donnybrook to talk to Irish internationals Harry McNulty and Mark Roach.
Amazing summer ahead. We've got so many tournaments. So we're going to Moscow on Thursday, which is part of the Grand Prix series, and that is the most important for us at the moment because that allows us to try and get back into Hong Kong next year. And we're also going to Marcoussis in France, and then we're going to Exeter, and then we've got Poland after the World Cup. Then we also have two World Series events, so we're going to London and we're going to Paris because we were the highest European nation on the World Series last year. So those tournaments are all in lead up then to the World Cup in July. So it's an amazing opportunity. And I'm loving absolutely every minute of it.
It's perfect for kids starting to learn the game, develop the core skills like passing, one-on-one tackling, kicking, throwing. So, you know, it has all those core skills that you need for the 15s game. And you're sprinting, you're running, and your agility, all that. But yeah, no, like you definitely need, I think, sevens in every country, every rugby country, because you know it's just so important with all those core skills.
You can just get some more opportunities here. You've got 7 guys on a pitch, so there's half the amount of people, there's more space. So say if you've been struggling in the 15s game because you're not getting the ball enough, you're not getting those breaks that you think you should be getting, you come down, you play a bit of sevens, you get that confidence back, you make a few breaks, you score a few tries, you get your one-on-one tackling down to a T, because every tackle is a one-on-one tackle. You miss it, the team's probably going to score a try. If they don't score a try, they're probably going 80 metres. So it really puts you under a lot of pressure, but then it also allows you to develop your skills and get your confidence back. And then when you go back into the 15s game, you're riding on a great wave of confidence and energy, and you know that you can back yourself in those situations, and I think it's proved, especially for a lot of those players going back to their provinces, to really been helpful. Adam Byrne, he played me in my first season. Tom Daly, who's just coming back from an injury. There's Barry Daly, Alex Wooten, Nick Timoney as well, Dan Goggin. There's so many players that I can name off, but those guys have all come through the Sevens programme at one stage, and they've been absolutely flying it down to their provinces, and some have even got Irish caps.
Do you feel that Sevens, kind of providing you get into the World Series at the next attempt or in the next couple of attempts, that it could become its own standing thing where people aim to become an Ireland player for the Sevens team rather than aiming to get into the 15s team via the Sevens? Yeah,
I hope so. There'll be two pathways. You can go with the 15s game or you can go with the Sevens game. I think it's obviously it'd be nice that you can transfer from either or. But it just gives guys another option. Like myself, I wasn't tall enough to play in the centre at the 15s game, and that's where I kept getting knocked down. So this opened another door for me. It doesn't matter about your height or your size. Look, if you got a good decision making brain or you got a good pass or good kick, there's always something there for you in the sevens. 15s, it's just the physicality goes up. Guys want size on their team. So it's just a little bit more difficult, but sevens definitely opens up a different pathway for guys who want to go pro. And look, it develops all those core skills, as I said, and all of a sudden you could be in the 15 side the next couple of years after doing sevens.
Because if you ever Google top 10 sporting events in the world, Hong Kong is always there. Just how good is it?
I've been very fortunate. I've been the last 2 years prior. I was playing in the 10s tournament with an Australian team, King's College, that I studied abroad down there. So I kind of had an idea going in before, and my dad actually played in the Hong Kong Sevens as well before it was professional. So
he played with Moss Keane, I understand.
Yeah, he actually did. Yeah, there's a photo of him and Moss Keane somewhere in the house. Right, so okay. Yeah, it was amazing for me. It was a really special tournament. Being able to play in the same tournament that my dad had played in, but then also being able to play with all these amazing players. It's wild. It's absolutely crazy. They pack all the fancy dress guys down in the south stand, and then there's just an atmosphere from 9 o'clock in the morning. It's something that everybody has to do. It's the number one for me.
All the other smaller countries, they absolutely love it. Like we were in Bosnia and Croatia a couple of years ago, and they just absolutely love it. They love the party environment. They love the fast nature of the game, and it just brings a sense of excitement to everybody, all the fans and all the players and staff and everything. So it's just a good sense of enjoyment and just fast nature game, and just you get a different feel for every game as well. Different game, different vibe. One game could be a stop-start. One game could just be quick as hell. So
So with sevens, there's a little bit less of a technical aspect to it because you don't have the likes of props and hookers, so those are very, very technical aspects of the game, especially with the scrummaging and the lineouts. Again, we do have scrums and lineouts, but they're broken down to a more basic level where it's just front row versus front row, so you're kind of just pushing, you're not getting very, very technical in those aspects. So it allows players to get in and just get stuck into the game straight away. Because there's less people, you get a lot more repetitions in during training and during games, so that means you can develop your skills a little bit quicker, whereas in 15s you might stand back because you're maybe a little bit nervous coming to the game, and you see that everybody might be that little bit more developed than you. So I see sevens definitely as the pathway for growing rugby through developing rugby nations, and then some of those players then will go play 15s. A lot of the best sevens players for those nations, like Germany and Chile, they actually do represent their 15s team as well.
Rugby, particularly in 15s, has gone to become almost like a size economy, where the kids are getting bigger every year, and the schools rugby, like, they're growing to such an incredible size. And you mentioned it there yourself, like, I mean, in terms of your own career, do you kind of park 15s now because people told you that you were too small?
No, like I kept going on. Like obviously my first time here, and it was not getting selected for the Irish under-20s because of my size, and there's a couple of injuries, and I got back into the squad, and I went to the World Cup, which was great. But no, I haven't fully parked it. It's on the side at the moment because I want to give sevens a good go and see where what I can get out of that.
Yeah. Is it sevens where you think you're going to stay now?
Personally, yeah, I do. I absolutely love the game. I find that I'm suited more to the game. With 15s, I just think that there's just too many people on the pitch, and I'm thinking a little bit too much, and I just find when I get into the sevens that my mind is at ease and I'm able to think a lot clearer, and I understand the game that bit much better. So yeah, I'm really hoping that sevens will be the pathway for me, but again, can't tell the future, and we'll have to just see. Yeah, so the Grand Prix is our route into the World Series. We have 4 tournaments, as I said before, starting with Moscow. And it's basically points accumulation over 4 tournaments. So the higher you come, the more points you get, and there's 3 spaces allocated to the European sides in Hong Kong. So we have to become one of the top 3 teams out of Europe that are not on the World Series. So the likes of England and France and Wales, they don't count. It'd be more us, Germany, Italy, Georgia. It looks like Russia might be coming down from the series this year, so they're going to be a part of that as well. And once you become one of the top 3 teams, you go to Hong Kong in April, and then it's winner takes all there, where you face all the other repechage countries. So the North and South Americas, Asia, Africa, all of those have teams coming. So it's winner takes all, and best is the best. Yeah.
And I'm sure many people would have been watching this year in April when you went to Hong Kong. Obviously, the disappointment against Japan is what a lot of people will remember. But at the same time, it was the men's sevens team being in the national picture over here in terms of the media, which is a good thing. But although at the time, I'm sure there was very few positives that you actually felt at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to play against Japan, unfortunately. I picked up an injury earlier in the tournament, but it's an amazing tournament, and it's the best in the world. It's the granddaddy of them all, as they say, Hong Kong. It's been around forever, but it's very, very difficult to go in on your first ever try and win the whole thing. The boys put in an absolutely amazing effort. It was literally a bounce of a ball that was the difference in that game, and then going into the final, it would have been against Germany, and we've played them a lot of times, so I would have backed our team to have gone through the whole way. But look, that's sevens, that's rugby, that's why we play it. It's high energy, it's so quick, and again, a bounce of ball was the only difference between that game. But an amazing opportunity to be able to represent our country and put us on the world stage. You know, we don't get to do that often. Sevens is growing in Ireland, and no doubt it's only going to get bigger, and hopefully we can get onto the series next year and grow the sport even more.
Is it fair to say that Sevens would kind of reward quick thinkers a little bit more?
Yeah, it would reward quick thinkers, you know, good decision makers, and you know, you got to be on the ball. You can't afford to make any sloppy mistakes or silly errors, missing tackles as well. So you know, you just got to be on the ball the whole time, focus in straight away from warm up into the full-time whistle.
Is there a tactical breakdown when you're playing in sevens? Is there a huge gusto in terms of what you're actually going to approach in terms of your opposition, or is it off the cuff, as some people may actually use that brush the tar sevens with?
We always have a plan going into a game. The plan will always change a little bit depending on who you're playing. So when it comes to kickoffs, we will have evaluated how a team sets up depending on certain kickoffs, and based on that we will look to put the ball in a certain place. So we'll either try and put it out near the wing because we think that they might be weaker there, or we might put it down the middle because we think that we've got a better opportunity there. Attack wise, we usually try and keep our structure to the same, because it's very hard to just keep changing your structure. You can't have 6 structures to play 6 different teams over a weekend. So there might be little points here and there where we might say, okay, they might be a little bit weak around the breakdown. We're going to go around the breakdown and attack there and try and get some go forward ball. And then when it comes to lineouts and scrums, basically you just have to see where you are on the pitch and kind of get a feel for it, and just you have a good understanding of kind of what works and what doesn't for you, and you have to just rely on your skills, and then every now and again you just have to see what happens. The game plan might go out the window, but you can't let it go away too far, otherwise you're not going to be able to play a game.
The two of the members of the Ireland Rugby Sevens team talking to you ahead of their trip to Moscow this week and qualification for the World Cup. They've already qualified for the World Cup. Yeah, but in between those two events, they're going on a Grand Prix event which will help them in future qualifications for the World Series, which is the be-all and end-all. That defeat to Japan earlier on this year in April in Hong Kong was obviously a devastating loss for them. The reason why is it would have got them one step closer to actually winning that repechage competition. That was in the semi-final. If they'd won that repechage competition, they would have got into the World Rugby Super 7 Series and the World Series of it. And that's what you want. That is the be-all and end-all of... That's when you start to be self-sufficient, and
exactly, it's actually a bigger deal. The feeling I got was that the Japan game was the biggest game they've had this year, and that the World Cup isn't. That being said, that'll completely change if they happen to beat Chile in the first round, and happen to cause one of the biggest shocks of the year if they manage to beat South Africa in the second round, who they're scheduled to play if they beat Chile. If they beat South Africa, then suddenly that becomes the be all and end all, obviously. But it's going to be very interesting. Like, it's obviously a fantastic sport. It's one of the easiest sports to pick up. It's a brilliant one from a neutral perspective. The party atmosphere was very evident in Rio in 2016 for the Olympics, and it was one of those sports that you watch and you're like, I really wish Ireland had a team in this. So in the men's capacity anyway. So hopefully they'll go forward and improve over the next couple of years and get into the Olympics. The women's team obviously are much higher in the rankings. They've kind of got a bit more of a head start with kind of better structures over the years, but the men's team are catching up. Yeah, when you say it's an easy sport to pick up, you get the sense that it could easily be a sport that they use to get non-traditional rugby playing areas playing rugby, and that's their gateway for, and I'm talking about for younger players, for kids. That's already happened. But like you mean within Ireland? Yeah, exactly. It's at a much more intense level than it has. So, like, at the minute, if you have 6 to 8 kids who are interested in playing rugby, they can't really play rugby. They've got to get transferred over to somewhere else. But if you've got 6 to 8 kids, suddenly you've got a sevens team. Yeah, absolutely. It's great sport. I mean, there is a number there between 6 and 8, which is 7, and that is how many people you need for a sevens rugby team. It's going to be great. I mean, it's San Fran. It's a great place for a tournament, the World Cup. Where's it on? San Fran. Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's going to be great. And you'd imagine that first game... We should cover that. Yeah, we should. I mean... they definitely need some extra media at the Sevens World Cup from an Irish perspective. Otherwise, those stories just won't get told. And as I say, it could be one of the sporting shocks of the year if they beat South Africa. Better safe than sorry. Better be there for that South Africa game, because I'm predicting that they will beat Chile in the first round. All right, so some comments for you. Sean Flaherty, Father Dougal, says the disciplinary process was known. It isn't over until there's a hearing, the date of which appears not to have been known to the Offaly board, who weren't involved in the situation. There seems to be plenty of blame to go around, but hammering them on that point made no sense. Hashtag OTBAM. I mean, really, Sean, your manager, who is like one of the most important people in your county when it comes to establishing the football philosophy, and is like the person that speaks to the media after every game,
is involved in a massive scandal and a massive disciplinary process, and you don't know the dates. You haven't asked them the dates. You haven't asked them what the process is. What's your defence? Are you really innocent of the charges? How are you innocent of the charges? Is that you in the footage that is doing the rounds on the internet? And if it isn't, well then what's the big deal? But if it is you, then do we really want to be associated with that? Yeah, we'll go the whole way through. Like, hammering them on the point of not having a clue about what's going on. Fair enough if you don't think that's the right way to go about it, but we certainly did. Next one. A highly entertaining interview with Stephen Wallace on @OffTheBallAM right now. Listen back if you missed it, says Joe Harrington. Dave Carr, he was clearly being sarcastic on the point of Offaly fans wanting to win the All-Ireland, clearly alluding to unrealistic expectations. Stupid to press him on that point. Well, it was more about the fact that there was somebody mid-rant talking stuff which wasn't true. It's like, no, hang on a second. That's not true. So let's establish some baseline here that this is going to be a conversation where we're actually trying to tell the truth to each other. That was all that was about. This is about players being, or managers being sacked mid-season. Tyrone says, surprised it isn't happening more often, especially if you've got poor league campaigns. Not ideal, although I think sometimes changing the manager is the only option if the atmosphere becomes so toxic. This comes back to Kieran Keane and Connacht as well. At Bear in the Square next. Wallace bemused at his sacking from Offaly. 1. You're banned for 8 to 12 weeks during the championship and can't attend any team-related activity. 2. Current players liked tweets which slated you as manager. 3. Some of the best players in the county will not play for you. I mean, that's tough. that's tough. I'm not gonna bring up other managers except that one who I won't name who was suspended for a game. I said, well, is it really Davy? Is he bringing up Davies compared to the same situation? Not the same situation, right?
It's a tad different. Well, at least, you know, the action came to Stephen Wallace on the sideline rather than Stephen Wallace running onto the pitch. That's a sarcastic point, Ger.
Yeah, okay. Colin McCarthy says, the suspension is so major that it cost him his job, but so trivial they didn't know about the appeal. We didn't know about the appeal. Why didn't you sack him in advance? The disciplinary process wasn't over, but you didn't know about the appeal. Like, it was completely illogical. Kevin13986, which looks like one of those made-up bots that are ruining our Twitter feeds at the moment, but actually...
he was born on the 13th of the 9th, 1986.
All right, okay.
So, happy birthday 4 months in advance, Kevin.
It's a YouTube name, is it? That's how that works. Okay, right, well, fair play. Offaly, for such a poor team, they certainly know how to stay relevant through Twitter and not results. Who cares? Listening to that interview, it sounds like a bunch of 12-year-olds who retweeted / who liked those tweets. And then who subsequently apparently unliked them because they had a lecture from the senior players because, you know, they can't make their own mind up. And
no, I mean...
They didn't initially go, yeah, I agree with that.
They're cogs in a wheel, they're robots, they're physical specimens. They don't have... They shouldn't be allowed any sort of free thinking.
Jared Quinlivan says, proof if it were ever needed, the county boards think and act contrary to inter-county players' wishes. You didn't really get the sense that... we speak with players' reps all the time. Didn't really get the sense that it was a two-way conversation, did you?
No, it felt like kind of a talking to rather than a talking with, for sure. It's an interesting one. Like well, here we go. There's another one.
PRO14, the incident in the Kerry Club match, behaviour unbecoming of an inter-county manager? ? Oh yeah, oh yes, it was, and completely different to anything else that I've seen from an inter-county manager on a pitch.
Yeah, it's definitely from an inter-county manager. Yeah, it's bizarre. Maybe he kind of felt the freedom to go a little bit mad because it was a club match.
Oliver Poole-Lou. It's awfully sad.
And there you go. That's probably kind of the nadir of this morning.
Tonight's show on the radio, it's going to be a great one. Paul McGinley, John Giles, Graham Hunter, Dahi Regan and Tommy Dunn. Tomorrow morning, Sean Cavanagh, Kevin Kilban, Alan Quillen. It is a great way to start the weekend. That's pretty much all we've got time for. We will be continuing the fallout from the Offaly situation across all of our channels. Make sure you subscribe on youtube.com/offtheball. And of course, you can get an audio-only feed up till 9:30 anyway on offtheball.com of this show every morning if you just want to listen to us talking bullshit instead of having to watch us without any makeup. Good luck.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.